Pack your bags, you're moving out today, my stepmom declared. This house is for real family only. I started packing, then mentioned I'd been paying the property taxes. Suddenly, she wanted to talk things through. I've been living in what my stepmom Linda calls her house for 6 years, ever since Dad married her when I was 18. But it's actually Dad's house, the one I grew up in, where Mom used to make Sunday pancakes before she passed when I was 15. But Linda has a PhD in rewriting history. In her version, she heroically rescued Dad from his sad, lonely existence and transformed our modest ranch into the perfect family home. Never mind that Dad had been doing just fine raising me solo for 3 years before she arrived with her 2 teenage daughters and endless opinions about everything. Linda works part-time at a salon, cutting hair and collecting gossip like trading cards. Dad's a maintenance supervisor. Steady work, steady guy who gets up at 5 a.m. and never complains, even when he should. When Linda moved in with Ashley, popular girl with highlights and attitude, and Brittany, quiet but sneaky trouble stirrer, I was finishing high school and figured I'd escape to college soon enough. Except college didn't work out as planned. Financial aid fell short, and Dad was already stretched thin, feeding 3 extra mouths. So I enrolled in community college, got a construction job, and planned to transfer later without drowning in debt. Seemed responsible. Linda saw it differently. To her, I wasn't a responsible student making smart choices. I was a grown man hogging space, meant for her precious princesses. The passive-aggressive campaign began immediately. Dad's old recliner mysteriously relocated to the basement, replaced by floral consignment shop furniture that fit Linda's aesthetic. When I asked about it, Dad just shrugged and said the couch worked fine. Then came the rent demand. $400 monthly, announced not discussed. Fair enough, except Linda was pocketing it instead of contributing to household expenses like she claimed. Meanwhile, she'd complained constantly about grocery costs and utility bills, making Dad look increasingly worried while Ashley got a car for her 17th birthday and Brittany got dance lessons and new clothes. When I mentioned needing textbook help, Linda informed me I was old enough to handle my own expenses. Here's the kicker. Despite all her penny-pinching theater, Linda never stressed about the big stuff. Every year when the $3,200 property tax bill arrived, she'd hand it to Dad with a dramatic sigh about figuring this out somehow. Dad would get that same worried expression he'd worn during Mom's medical bills, staying up late with his calculator and a mountain of paperwork. I started paying attention to the numbers. Dad's decent salary was getting stretched impossibly thin, supporting Linda's part-time work schedule and her daughter's endless needs. The property tax became his twice-yearly nightmare. So the third year, when that familiar tax bill arrived and I saw Dad's worried face, I made a decision. I quietly drove to the county treasurer's office and paid the entire $3,200 myself. Linda can call it her house all she wants, but I know whose name is on the deed, and now I know who's actually keeping the roof over our heads. I didn't make a big announcement about it. I didn't ask for recognition or gratitude. I just paid it and mentioned to Dad later that he didn't need to worry about the property taxes this year because I'd taken care of it. He was so relieved he almost cried. He kept saying, "You didn't have to do that, son." But I could see the weight lifting off his shoulders. Linda's reaction was different. When Dad told her the taxes were paid, she seemed more annoyed than grateful. "How did Matthew afford that?" she asked, like she was suspicious of my motives. When Dad explained that I'd been saving money from my construction job, she just said, "Well, I hope he doesn't expect special treatment for it." Special treatment. Like paying a major household expense deserved some kind of gold star. But the thing is, once you start taking care of something, it becomes your responsibility. The next year, when property tax time came around, I paid it again. And the year after that. It became routine. Dad would get the bill, start to look worried, and I'd quietly take care of it. By the 4th year, he stopped worrying about it entirely. He knew I'd handle it. Linda never acknowledged it. Never said thank you. Never mentioned it in her lectures about household expenses. In her mind, apparently, I was just another freeloader taking advantage of her generosity in letting me live in her house. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was paying more than my fair share, $400 in rent plus $3,200 in annual property taxes, while Ashley and Brittany contributed exactly nothing. Ashley had graduated high school and was working part-time at a retail store in the mall, but her paychecks went toward clothes, makeup, and gas for the car Dad had bought her. Brittany was still in high school, but had a steady babysitting gig that paid pretty well for a teenager. Their earnings went to whatever teenage girls spend money on. None of it went toward household expenses. But I was the problem. I was the one taking up space, eating their food, using their utilities. Linda made sure I knew it too. She'd make comments about how crowded the house felt with so many people, how hard it was to keep the refrigerator stocked, how she couldn't wait until her daughters had more space to spread out. The passive-aggressive campaign escalated over the years. Linda would forget to include me when she made dinner plans. She'd rearrange the house in ways that made it clear my presence was temporary, converting what used to be a family den into a craft room for herself, talking about turning the basement into Ashley's private space. She never directly told me to leave, but the message was clear. Dad either didn't notice or chose not to see what was happening. He's always been the type to avoid conflict, to hope that problems would resolve themselves if he just kept his head down and worked hard. When I tried to talk to him about Linda's attitude, he'd say things like, "She's just stressed about money," or "It's hard blending families," or "Give it time, she'll come around." But Linda wasn't coming around. If anything, she was getting bolder about her resentment of my presence. She started referring to Ashley and Brittany as her girls and making distinctions between them and me. "My girls need to use the bathroom now," she'd say, when I was getting ready for work in the morning. "My girls have friends coming over, so try to keep it down," when I was watching TV in the living room. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March, 6 years after Linda had moved into our house. I was getting ready for work, packing my lunch and checking my phone for the day's weather forecast, when Linda appeared in the kitchen. She was already dressed and had that determined look on her face that meant she'd made a decision about something. "Matthew," she said, her voice artificially cheerful in that way people use when they're about to say something horrible. "We need to talk." I glanced at the clock. I had about 10 minutes before I needed to leave for work. "Can it wait until tonight? I've got to get going." "No," she said firmly. "This can't wait. Sit down." Something in her tone made me pause. I set down my lunch and looked at her more carefully. She was standing with her arms crossed, that fake smile still plastered on her face, but her eyes were cold. "What's going on, Linda?" "I've been thinking about this for a long time," she said, "and I've made a decision. You need to move out. Today." The words hit me like a slap. "What?" "You heard me. Pack your bags. You're moving out today. This arrangement isn't working anymore." I stared at her, trying to process what was happening. "This arrangement? You mean me living in my dad's house?" Her fake smile wavered slightly. "This is my house too, Matthew. Your father and I are married. We're a family. And this house is for real family only. Real family." There it was. The thing she'd been thinking but never quite saying for 6 years. I wasn't real family. Despite growing up in this house, despite my mother's memory lingering in every room, despite the fact that my name was literally on some of the utility accounts from when I'd helped Dad transfer them after Mom died, I wasn't real family. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around what was happening. Linda shrugged, like she'd given about 30 seconds of thought to the logistics of making someone homeless. "You're 24 years old, Matthew. You have a job. Figure it out. Maybe get an apartment with some friends. Most people your age don't live with their parents anyway." "This isn't just about living with parents, Linda. This is about you kicking me out of the house I grew up in. The house we all live in," she corrected. "And it's getting too crowded. Ashley needs her own space now that she's working. Brittany is going to be a senior next year, and she needs a quiet place to study. We need the room. Ashley needed space. Brittany needed quiet. What I needed, apparently, didn't matter." "Does Dad know about this?" I asked. Linda's smile became even more strained. "Your father and I have discussed it. We both agree it's time for you to become more independent." I knew that was a lie. Dad might go along with Linda's decisions to avoid conflict, but there was no way he'd agreed to kick me out with zero notice. He wouldn't do that to his own son. "I want to hear it from him," I said. "He's already left for work," Linda said quickly. "But we can call him later and you can confirm it yourself. The point is, Matthew, the decision has been made. I need you to pack your things and be out by the end of the day." "The end of the day? Linda, you can't just—" "Yes, I can," she interrupted. "This is my house, and I have the right to decide who lives here and who doesn't. You're not on the lease, you don't own any part of this property, and you're not my responsibility. I've been more than patient with this situation, but enough is enough." The smugness in her voice was infuriating. She stood there in the kitchen of the house where my mother had taught me to cook scrambled eggs, where my dad had helped me with homework for 12 years. Years. Where I'd celebrated every birthday and Christmas I could remember, and acted like I was some random stranger who'd overstayed his welcome. "More than patient," I repeated. "That's interesting considering I've been paying you $400 a month in rent, which barely covers the extra utilities and groceries you use," she shot back. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to feed an extra person? How much the water bill goes up with another person taking showers? How much more we spend on electricity with you running that computer and TV in your room? I almost laughed. Linda had clearly spent a lot of time rehearsing this conversation, working out all the justifications for why my contributions weren't really contributions. She'd probably been planning this speech for months, waiting for the right moment to deliver it. You know what? I said, reaching for my work bag. You're right. I should move out. This clearly isn't working for anyone. Linda's expression shifted slightly, like she'd expected more of a fight. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Oh, I'm being very reasonable, I said. In fact, let me start packing right now. But first, I need to make a quick call. A call to who? The county treasurer's office, I said, pulling out my phone. I need to let them know that I won't be handling the property tax payments anymore since I'm moving out. Linda's face went blank. What property tax payments? The ones I've been paying for the past 4 years, I said casually, scrolling through my contacts. You know, the $3,200 annual property taxes on this house. The ones that keep you from losing the place to tax liens. The color drained from Linda's face. You... what? Yeah. I've been covering the property taxes since 2019. Dad was always stressed about coming up with that money, so I just started paying them. No big deal, really. I mean, it's only $3,200 a year. But since I won't be living here anymore and this house is for real family only, I figure you and Dad can handle that yourselves. Linda stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, her mouth slightly open, doing what I could only assume was mental math. She was calculating how much money I'd been contributing that she hadn't acknowledged, how much of a financial hit they'd take without my contributions. Matthew, she said slowly, let's not be hasty about this. Hasty? I raised an eyebrow. Linda, you just told me to pack my bags and get out today. How is that not hasty? I mean, maybe we should talk this through. Sit down and have a real conversation about how to make this living situation work better for everyone. The desperation in her voice was almost funny. 5 minutes ago, I was a burden who needed to be kicked out immediately. Now that she'd realized exactly how much that burden was worth financially, suddenly she wanted to talk things through. I don't think there's much to talk about, I said. You made it pretty clear that I'm not real family, and this house isn't my home. So I'll just pack my things and find somewhere else to live. And you can handle all the household expenses yourself, since you've been so patient about me not contributing enough. Now wait, Linda said, her voice rising slightly. I never said you weren't contributing. I said the rent barely covers the extras, but that doesn't mean the rent barely covers the extras, I repeated. So $400 a month plus $3,200 a year barely covers my share of utilities and groceries. That's interesting math, Linda. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could practically see her brain working, trying to figure out how to backtrack from everything she'd just said without admitting she'd been wrong. Look, she said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. Maybe I was a little harsh earlier. It's just that the house does feel crowded sometimes, and I thought maybe we could find a solution that works for everyone. Your solution was for me to move out today, I reminded her. That seemed pretty definitive. But maybe there are other options, she said quickly. Maybe we could rearrange things, give everyone more space. Maybe Ashley could move to the basement room, or we could turn the garage into a bedroom, or... Linda, I interrupted. An hour ago you were telling me to pack my bags because I wasn't real family. Now you want to renovate the house to make room for me. What changed? She couldn't answer that question honestly without admitting that money was the only thing that changed her mind. So she stood there, looking increasingly desperate, trying to find some way to walk back her ultimatum without losing face. I think you misunderstood what I was saying earlier, she finally said. I wasn't trying to kick you out permanently. I was just suggesting that maybe it was time for you to start thinking about getting your own place. You know, for your independence. By the end of the day, I said. You wanted me gone by the end of the day. I was frustrated. Sometimes I say things when I'm frustrated that I don't really mean. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had spent 6 years making it clear that I didn't belong in my own childhood home, who had just minutes earlier told me I wasn't real family, who was now scrambling to undo the damage because she'd realized how much money she'd lose. You know what, Linda? I think your first instinct was right. I should move out. Her eyes widened. Matthew, please, let's just sit down and talk about this rationally. We are talking rationally, I said. You rationally decided that this house is for real family only and that I don't qualify. I'm rationally accepting your decision and making arrangements to leave. But we could work out a new arrangement. Maybe adjust the rent or... The rent that barely covers my expenses? I asked. The rent you were just complaining about 5 minutes ago? Linda was trapped and she knew it. She couldn't admit that money was the real issue without revealing how calculating and selfish she'd been. She couldn't take back her real family comment without admitting how cruel it was. And she couldn't convince me to stay without acknowledging that my financial contributions were significant. Maybe I spoke too quickly, she said. Maybe I didn't think through all the implications. The implications, I repeated. Like the fact that without my rent and property tax payments, you and Dad would be paying an extra $7,400 a year in expenses? Her face flushed red. She'd been caught, and she knew it. It's not about the money, she said weakly. Really? Because it seems like it became about the money pretty quickly once you realized how much I was actually contributing. Linda looked around the kitchen, like she was searching for an escape route. Look, Matthew, I may have overreacted earlier. Sometimes when I'm stressed about the house feeling crowded, I say things I don't mean. But that doesn't mean we can't work something out. Work what out exactly? Well, maybe we could give you more space. Maybe redo the basement so you have a bigger area to yourself. Or maybe we could talk to Ashley about sharing her room with Brittany so you could have your own bathroom. The suggestions were getting more desperate. Linda was throwing out ideas without thinking them through, just trying to find something that would convince me not to leave. A few minutes ago, Ashley needed her own space and Brittany needed quiet to study, I pointed out. Now you're willing to have them share a room? Well, families make compromises. Real families make compromises, I said. I thought we established that I'm not real family. Linda's fake smile finally cracked completely. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. How did you mean it? She couldn't answer that question either. There wasn't a good way to spin telling someone they're not real family, especially when you're saying it to justify kicking them out of their childhood home. I meant that. I meant that you're an adult now, and adults need their independence. Is that why you wanted me out by the end of the day? For my independence? I thought maybe if you had a deadline, it would motivate you to start looking for your own place. The lies were getting weaker and weaker. Linda was grasping at straws, trying to find some explanation that didn't make her look like the villain. Well, mission accomplished, I said. I'm motivated to find my own place. In fact, I'm going to start looking today. Matthew, please, can we start over? Can we sit down and have a real conversation about this? We just had a real conversation, Linda. You told me exactly how you feel about me living here. I'm just accepting your decision. But I was wrong, she said desperately. I was stressed, and I said things I shouldn't have said. Can't we just forget about this morning and try again? I looked at her. This woman who had made my life miserable for 6 years, who had treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own home, who had just tried to throw me out with zero notice, and was now begging me to stay because she'd realized how much money she'd lose. Linda, I said calmly, you weren't wrong about one thing. I am 24 years old, and I should have my own place. You're right that most people my age don't live with their parents. Maybe it is time for me to get some independence. But you don't have to move out today, she said quickly. Take your time. Look around. Find a nice place. There's no rush. Actually, I think there is a rush, I said. You made it pretty clear that my presence here is a problem. The house is too crowded. You need space for Ashley and Brittany. And I'm not really part of the family anyway. So the sooner I leave, the better for everyone. I didn't mean... Linda, we both know exactly what you meant. The only thing that's changed is that you realized how much money you'd lose without me here. She opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. There was no point in lying when we both knew the truth. Look, I said, checking the time on my phone. I need to get to work. But don't worry about me. I'll start packing tonight and be out of your way as soon as possible. Problem solved. Matthew, wait. But I was already heading for the door. I grabbed my lunch from the counter and my work bag from the chair, giving Linda one last look. Oh, and Linda? You might want to call Dad and let him know about your decision. I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear that you kicked out his son while he was at work. And you might also want to start saving up for that property tax bill. It'll be due in about 3 months. I left her standing in the kitchen, looking like someone had just told her she'd won the lottery and then immediately lost the ticket. The drive to work gave me time to think about what had just happened. For 6 years, I'd been trying to be the perfect housemate, the ideal stepson, the family member who never caused problems and always contributed more than his share. I'd paid rent, covered major expenses, and kept my head down when Linda made it clear I wasn't really wanted. And in one conversation, she'd shown me exactly how little all of that meant to her. The moment she thought she could get rid of me without consequences, she'd been ready to throw me out with zero notice. It was only when she realized the financial impact that she wanted to talk things through. My phone started buzzing around 10 a.m. Linda's name on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Another voicemail. By lunchtime, I'd received 6 calls from Linda and 3 texts, all variations of, We need to talk, and don't make any hasty decisions. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. She'd been ready to make me homeless with a few hours' notice, but now I was the one being hasty. Around 1 p.m., my dad called. "Matthew," he said, and I could hear the stress in his voice. "Linda told me what happened this morning. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding, Dad?" "She said you two had an argument about living arrangements, and now you're talking about moving out." An argument about living arrangements. That was one way to describe being told to pack my bags and get out because I wasn't real family. "Did she tell you what she said to me?" I asked. There was a pause. "She said she suggested it might be time for you to think about getting your own place, and you took it the wrong way." "Dad, she told me to pack my bags and be out by the end of the day. She said the house was for real family only." Another pause, longer this time. "She didn't tell me that part." "I'm sure she didn't." "Son, I don't want you to move out. This is your home too." It was nice to hear him say that, even if it came 6 years too late. "Dad, I can't keep living in a place where Linda makes it clear every day that I'm not wanted. She doesn't mean it that way." "Yes, she does," I interrupted. "Dad, she's been trying to get rid of me for years. This morning, she finally worked up the nerve to actually do it. The only reason she wants to talk things through now is because she realized how much money she'd lose without me here." "What do you mean?" I took a breath. "Dad, did you know I've been paying the property taxes for the past 4 years?" Silence. "Matthew," he said slowly, "you didn't have to do that." "I know I didn't have to. I wanted to help. You were always stressed about coming up with that money, and I had the cash, so I just took care of it." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I did tell you. Every year when the bill came, I told you not to worry about it because I'd handled it. I thought you just meant you'd helped with part of it." "No, Dad. I paid the whole thing. $3,200 a year for the past 4 years. Plus $400 a month in rent. That's over $14,000 I've contributed to keeping this house running, and this morning Linda told me it barely covers my share of utilities and groceries." Another long silence. "I didn't know," he said finally. Linda didn't know either, apparently, but she figured it out pretty quickly when I mentioned I wouldn't be paying the taxes anymore since I was moving out. "Matthew, please, let's all sit down tonight and work this out." "Dad, there's nothing to work out." Linda made her feelings clear. She wants me gone, and honestly, maybe she's right. Maybe it is time for me to have my own place. But you don't have to leave because of what Linda said. This is your home. "Is it, though?" I asked. "Because Linda seems to think it's her house, and she gets to decide who belongs here." Dad sighed heavily. "I'll talk to her." "Don't bother, Dad. Really. Maybe this is for the best. I'm 24 years old. I have a good job, and I can afford my own place. Maybe Linda did me a favor by forcing the issue. I don't want you to leave angry." "I'm not angry," I said, and realized it was true. "I'm just done. I'm done trying to prove I belong in a place where someone will always see me as an outsider." That evening, I came home to find Linda waiting in the living room. She'd clearly been rehearsing another speech, but when she saw me, her carefully prepared words seemed to desert her. "Matthew," she said, "I owe you an apology." I set down my work bag and looked at her. "For what specifically?" "For this morning. For the things I said. I was frustrated about the space situation, and I took it out on you unfairly." "The space situation?" I repeated. "Yes. And I realize now that I didn't take into account all the ways you contribute to the household. Your father explained about the property taxes, and I had no idea you'd been taking care of that." "Linda, the property tax payments were never a secret. Dad knew about them. I never tried to hide what I was doing." "I know, but I didn't realize the full extent of your contributions. And I certainly didn't mean to imply that you weren't part of the family. You said the house was for real family only." She winced. "I was angry. I say stupid things when I'm angry." "What were you angry about exactly?" Linda shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "It's just, sometimes I feel like the house is so crowded, and I want Ashley and Brittany to have space to grow up, and I worry about money constantly, and I lashed out at you unfairly." "You worry about money constantly," I said, "while I've been paying $7,400 a year in rent and property taxes. I didn't realize it was that much." "Linda, you set the rent amount. You knew exactly how much I was paying you every month. But I didn't connect it to the property taxes. I didn't think about the total amount." I sat down across from her, studying her face. "What do you want, Linda?" "I want you to stay," she said. "I want us to find a way to make this work for everyone." "Why?" "Because you're part of this family. This morning I wasn't. This morning I made a mistake. Linda, let me ask you something. If I had told you this morning that I'd never paid a penny toward the property taxes, that I was just paying the $400 rent and nothing else, would you still want me to stay?" She opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. I could see her working through the implications of the question. That's not a fair question. It's perfectly fair. You didn't know about the property taxes this morning when you told me to leave. You only wanted to talk things through after you found out how much money you'd lose. So I'm asking, if there was no extra money involved, would you still want me here? Linda couldn't answer that question honestly, without admitting that her change of heart was purely financial. And she couldn't lie convincingly, because we both knew the truth. It's not just about money, she said weakly. But it is about money, I said. Linda, for 6 years you've made it clear that you resent my presence here. You've treated me like an unwelcome guest who was overstaying his welcome. You've made comments about how crowded the house is, how expensive it is to feed an extra person, how much space Ashley and Brittany need. The only thing that changed between this morning and tonight is that you realized how expensive it would be to get rid of me. That's not... yes, the money is a factor, but... Linda, just stop. We both know what this is about. You want me to stay because you can't afford for me to leave. And that's fine. That's honest, at least. But let's not pretend this is some big family reconciliation. She looked down at her hands. So what happens now? Now I move out, I said. Like you wanted this morning. But the money will be your problem to figure out. Just like it was Dad's problem before I started helping. Matthew, please, can't we just... Can't we start over? Try to make this work better? I looked at this woman who had spent 6 years making me feel unwelcome in my own home, who had tried to throw me out that very morning, and who was now begging me to stay purely for financial reasons. Linda, let me explain something to you. This morning, you didn't just tell me to move out. You told me I wasn't real family. You made it clear that in your mind, this house belongs to you and your daughters, and I'm just some guy taking up space. Even if I stayed now, that wouldn't change. You'd still see me the same way. The only difference is that now you'd resent having to pretend otherwise. I wouldn't. Yes, you would. Because that's who you are. You'd smile and be polite and try to make nice, but every day you'd be calculating how much money you were saving by keeping me around. And I'd know it. We'd both know it. That's no way to live. Linda was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more defeated. So there's nothing I can say to change your mind? Linda, you had 6 years to make me feel welcome here. You had 6 years to treat me like family instead of an inconvenience. You didn't want to do it then, and the only reason you want to do it now is money. That tells me everything I need to know. She nodded slowly, finally understanding that her financial desperation wasn't going to be enough to undo years of resentment and hostility. When will you leave? She asked. I'll start looking for places this weekend. Probably be out within a month. And the property taxes? I almost smiled. Even in defeat, she couldn't help asking about the money. Like I said this morning, you and Dad will need to handle those yourselves. The next payment is due in about 3 months. Better start saving. That night, after Linda had gone upstairs and Dad had come home to a very awkward conversation about the day's events, I sat in my room looking around at the space I'd called home for my entire life. The walls still had marks from posters I'd hung in middle school. The closet still held clothes from high school that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. The window still looked out on the same backyard where Dad had taught me to throw a football, and where Mom had helped me build a treehouse that was probably still falling apart in the old oak tree. But Linda was right about one thing. I was 24 years old. Most people my age had their own places, their own lives separate from their parents. I'd stayed here partly out of financial necessity, but also partly out of inertia. It was easier to stay in the familiar space than to venture out into the unknown. Maybe Linda had done me a favor. Maybe I needed someone to push me out of the nest, even if their motives were selfish. Over the next 3 weeks, I looked at apartments, calculated budgets, and made plans. I found a decent 2-bedroom place about 15 minutes from work. Nothing fancy, but clean and affordable. The rent was $800 a month, twice what I'd been paying Linda, but it came with something that had been missing from my life for 6 years, the certainty that I was wanted there. Linda and I maintained a polite distance during my remaining time in the house. She didn't try to change my mind again, and I didn't rub her face in the financial consequences of her decision. Dad was sad about me leaving, but he understood why I felt it was necessary. Ashley and Brittany barely seemed to notice. They'd gotten what they'd always wanted, which was more space and one less person competing for attention. The day I moved out, Dad helped me load my belongings into a rental truck. Linda stayed inside, avoiding the whole scene. As we were finishing up, Dad pulled me aside. I'm sorry about how this all went down, he said. I should have paid more attention to what was happening. I should have stood up for you more. Dad, it's okay, really. This is probably for the best. But losing that property tax help? He looked worried. You'll figure it out, I said. You always do. And hey, maybe Linda will pick up some extra hours at the salon? Dad managed a rueful smile. Maybe. As I drove away from the house where I'd grown up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For 6 years, I'd been walking on eggshells, trying to prove I belonged somewhere I'd always belonged. I'd been paying for the privilege of being made to feel unwelcome in my own home. My new apartment was quiet, empty, and completely mine. No one could tell me I didn't belong there. No one could make me feel like an unwelcome guest. No one could kick me out because I wasn't real family. I got a text from Linda about 3 months later, right around the time the property taxes would have been due. Hope you're doing well in your new place. We miss having you around. No mention of money, no direct request for help, just a casual message that could be interpreted as either genuine sentiment or a fishing expedition. I didn't respond. 6 months after that, Dad called to tell me that Linda had picked up extra hours at the salon and they'd managed to cover the property taxes, though it had been tight. He sounded proud of her for stepping up, and I was genuinely happy for him. Maybe being forced to take financial responsibility would be good for Linda. A year after I'd moved out, I ran into Ashley at the grocery store. She was polite but distant, the way people are when they feel vaguely guilty about something but don't want to address it directly. "How's the house?" I asked. "Good," she said. "Spacious. Mom turned your old room into her home office." "That's nice. She always wanted more space." Ashley nodded, then hesitated. "You know, she never really talks about what happened with you moving out. I wouldn't expect her to. But I think she knows she messed up. She's been different since then. More careful about money, more aware of what things cost." "Good for her." Ashley shifted uncomfortably. Do you miss it? Living there?" I thought about the question for a moment. "I miss the house," I said finally. "I miss having Dad around every day. I miss the familiarity of it. But I don't miss feeling unwelcome in my own home." "She never meant to make you feel unwelcome. Ashley, your mom told me to pack my bags and get out, because the house was for real family only. I'm pretty sure she meant to make me feel unwelcome." Ashley winced. "She says things when she's angry." "I know. And I decided I didn't want to keep walking on eggshells, wondering what she might say the next time she got angry." We said goodbye after that, and I haven't seen any of them since. Dad and I talk on the phone regularly, and he visits my apartment sometimes. He's never brought Linda along, and I've never asked him to.